After its defeat in World War II, Japan gave up control of the Korean peninsula. The Soviet Union and the United States agreed to temporarily divide the peninsula along the 38th parallel. The northern half was controlled by the Soviet Union and became a communist state. The southern half was supported by the United States. The North and South Korean governments kept an uneasy peace through the late 1940s. Then, in June 1950, Joseph Stalin, the General Secretary of the Soviet Union, approved the North Korean plan to conquer the whole peninsula. The North Korean leader, Kim Il-sung, planned to forcibly unite the peninsula under communism. On July 15, 1950, tanks rolled across the 38th parallel. Nearly 100,000 well-trained and well-armed combat troops swarmed into the south, meeting little resistance from the South Korean army. The United States supported South Korea and its president, Syngman Rhee, while the Soviet Union funneled money and weapons into communist North Korea. President Harry S. Truman was afraid that the North Korean invasion was just the beginning of a Soviet plan to conquer the free world. He believed that the real threat was a Soviet invasion of Western Europe. Meanwhile, Communist China's chairman, Mao Zedong, was determined to stand by the North Korean communists. He feared the growth of American power in East Asia. The Security Council of the United Nations called an emergency session. With the Soviet Union absent, the Council passed a resolution urging members to help South Korea defend itself against the attack. In June 1950, American troops were rushed to the aid of South Korea. But the American and South Korean forces were quickly overwhelmed. By September 10th, the South Korean army and a small American force had been driven down to the tip of the peninsula. The UN Security Council appointed American General Douglas MacArthur to take command of all United Nations forces in Korea.
We were informed that there would be no more retreats, that we would stand, hold our positions, no more withdrawals, and that if we had to, we'd have to die in that position. And that's the way it was stressed to us, that we had to hold.
General MacArthur decided to take a daring gamble. On September 15, 1950, UN forces landed at Incheon on Korea's west coast. The North Koreans could not resist the attack, and MacArthur's troops took advantage of their weaknesses. Soon after, the North Korean forces retreated, and Incheon was firmly in the hands of the United Nations forces. General MacArthur had won an important battle against the communists, and President Truman ordered him to drive the North Koreans back across into North Korea. MacArthur was given permission to cross the 38th parallel, separating North and South Korea, to completely destroy the North Korean army. Alarmed by the advancing UN forces, Chairman Mao Zedong ordered more than 150,000 Chinese troops into North Korea to save the North Korean government and protect China. Earlier that same day, General MacArthur had guaranteed Truman that China would never enter the war. By the end of 1950, the North Koreans and their Chinese allies had succeeded in driving all United Nations forces back below the 38th parallel. Frustrated, General MacArthur planned to expand the war into China. In war, there is no substitute for victory, he said, and that meant all-out war with China. MacArthur even proposed using atomic bombs against the Chinese. But Truman, afraid of bringing the Soviet Union into the war, said no. The President and the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the Pentagon refused to listen to MacArthur's demands, and soon the United States government replaced General MacArthur. By June of 1953, both North Korea and the United Nations forces held their ground at the 38th parallel, roughly the same point where the war had begun. Physically and emotionally spent, both sides agreed to discuss a truce. The combatants agreed to an armistice in July of 1953 and signed the agreement ending the war on July 27, 1953. America's soldiers, battle-weary and worn, were happy to have made it through the nightmare. But for Koreans, the divisions continued to grow. While leaders on both sides have tried to bring people on this shattered peninsula together, anger and distrust have continued to keep the North and South apart.